Wow, this is really something else. I'm truly humbled to be here today. I'm humbled to be here with Boaz and Nurit, who are, without a doubt, and I travel and speak around the world, the best ambassadorial team out there. It's not just that they're in a difficult neighborhood. They have shown that with persistence, a fighting spirit, when you don't take BS from anybody, you can actually get results. And they are truly the kind of foreign policy warriors that we need to have in each and every one of our embassies. And I'm particularly happy that they were here. If we are to send them anywhere, it is to a difficult neighborhood. So I am humbled by this. And I am humbled by your presence, by your coming out here today to express your support and your love for Israel, and give us the small opportunity to thank you. To thank you for standing up for what is right, and for what is good, and for what is true. So truly, thank you, thank you, thank you. So what I want to do this evening is to lift the veil from what is going on. And maybe you already sense that this is what's going on as you fight for Israel, as you stand up for it. But I'll give you a sense of what I think is going on. It's not about a PR war. It's not about criticism. It's not about Israel's image and improving it. What we have going on right now is a war. And it is not a war waged by means of tanks or airplanes or tunnels or rockets. It is a war waged by means of words and images and ideas. So it is a war, and yet it seems to be waged by means that are non-violent. And that is supposedly something that we should celebrate, right? We speak so often about non-violent resistance. We think about leaders who lead non-violent resistance. We think about Gandhi. We think about Martin Luther King. So we assume that if the means are non-violent, so too are the ends. But there's no relation. You can have a violent struggle for a noble cause. And you can have a non-violent struggle for a very sinister cause. And this is precisely what we are seeing here. The cause is the same that it's always been, even when it was waged by violent means. It is the cause of undoing Zionism and undoing its primary and most important crowning achievement, the establishment of the State of Israel as the national home of the Jewish people. There were efforts to achieve this end by military invasions, by terrorism, by economic strangulation. All have failed. Not only have they failed, we have emerged stronger from those challenges. Israel's need to physically defend itself meant that we have developed one of the best fighting forces in the world, the International Defense Forces, and a society that is mobilized to its own defense. The Arab boycott meant to strangle the Israeli economy, the fledgling economy, meant that we realized that we need to trade with the United States and Europe and India and China. So Israel is the only country in the world that does not trade with the countries that share its borders. And yet, we have one of the world's strongest export economies. We had no choice. And we have even learned how to beat terrorism. Not that it has been vanquished completely, but to the point that we can continue to live our lives and enjoy our lives and celebrate our lives. So we have emerged stronger from all our challenges. But the other side has never given up. Whenever we became strong, they merely changed tactic. So when people now celebrate the fact that the other side uses diplomatic means of non-violent resistance, popular boycotts, we should not be celebrating anything. They have not given up on violence because they have seen the light and realized that they are truly pacifists. They are renouncing violence because violence has failed them. So they're trying something else. So this is a non-violent war waged for very violent ends. I call it the placard war. I'm sure you've seen those placards and demonstrations everywhere. They say, Zionism equals. Now, you might know that Zionism equals the inspirational idea of the liberation movement of the Jewish people, the return of the Jewish people to establish a sovereign state in their homeland. But that's not what you see on the placards. Even you who love Israel will know to tell me that on these placards it says Zionism equals racism, colonialism, imperialism, apartheid, and recently joined the group, genocide. And people who will know nothing about Israel and Zionism will know that. And I have met those people in high schools and colleges around the world. Students who believe that they are in the know will ask questions as, what do you have to say about the apartheid wall? And I can assure you that they know nothing else. What do you have to say about Zionism's colonial practices? But they know nothing else. So this has been a very effective strategy. And it's not been an accidental strategy. It has a clear purpose. And the purpose is not criticism of Israel, not a discussion of the issues. The purpose is to paint Israel and Zionism as the ultimate evil. These words are chosen because they have become associated in the global mind with evil. And if Israel and Zionism are the ultimate evil, then shouldn't people of goodwill do something to make sure that that evil is erased from the face of the earth? Even the Nazis were convinced they were doing something good. Their mind has been prepared to such an extent that they believed that by eliminating the Jewish people, they were serving the world. They were doing something good for the world, ridding it of a disease. So if you think about it in history, the greatest atrocities have been preceded by the preparation of people's minds. And this is what we're seeing today. This is the nature of this war. It's not about independence for Palestine. If it had been about independence for Palestine, this war would have been waged by other means, and by the way, Palestine would have existed a long time ago. This is a war that is waged still in order to ensure that Zionism is rolled back, that the state of Israel as the national expression of the Jewish people no longer exists. and people's minds are being prepared. Because if Israel and Zionism are truly so evil, then something must be done if you are a person of goodwill. And I can assure you that many people who are involved in these campaigns believe that they are a person of goodwill, who are promoting good in this world. If you have been told, day in, day out, that Zionism and Israel are evil, then you do whatever you can to make sure that that evil no longer exists. And that is the nature of this war. Because it's amazing the extent to which it has been successful. When that young man in a college in Virginia asked me what I had to say about the fact that Zionism is colonialism, I had to tell him a few basic things. What colonial movement in history was sent by no one to a country with zero natural resources? I can assure you 150 years ago they didn't know we will find natural gas. So people coming out of their own volition to a place with no natural resources, purchasing land, having an ideal of working the land with their bare hands and employing no one else to do it for them, and above it all, in their minds, believed that they were coming home. I'm not aware of any other such colonial movement in history. I can tell you that this young man had no idea of that. And people speak of apartheid. But how many people are aware of context, of the fact that there is a national struggle? And everything you see is the outcome of a national struggle. And a national struggle, by the way, in which one side, the Jewish people, has been willing to settle for something less than everything, and therefore they have something. And another, which has refused to settle for anything less than everything, and therefore they have nothing. That is the essence of this national struggle. Everything else is details. Some people would like to tell you, it's an inflammation of passions given the difficult images that we have seen on television this summer. I'll open a parenthesis about these images. They are harrowing, but they are not accidental. It is not only about Hamas operating from densely populated areas. Have you wondered why there are no images of fighting between soldiers and Hamas militants? Israeli soldiers were coming from the battle and saying, if this is not war, we don't know what is. They were fighting Hamas militants, well armed by local-made arms, Iranian-shipped arms, and yet we saw none of them. Hamas had a clear strategy. Hamas knew that with all due respect for the rockets and the tunnels, the real war was taking place on the screens of BBC. They knew that that was the real battleground. And they made sure they have a totalitarian control of the Gaza Strip. They made sure that no image of Hamas militants came out. Journalists later testified to that. They made sure that no image of rockets being launched from near schools or densely populated areas was got to go out. So all that remained were images of women and children dying. And then what is the story? Israel is senselessly killing women and children for no good reason, just because it enjoys it. The Israelis are baby killers. That is an essentialist argument. It's not about civilians dying in war. It is about Israelis in their very essence being baby killers. Now, at least in the ancient blood libels, the Jewish people were blamed for killing children in order to use their blood to make matzahs for the Passover Seder. At least there was a use. In this new libel, there's no purpose. Sheer enjoyment. The Israelis are baby killers. And then it's genocide. Well, sometimes things are so outrageous, you need to use a little bit of humor. I don't know how much it's effective, but one of the favorite articles, mock articles I saw after the claim of genocide began to appear was that Israel's Minister for Genocidal Affairs had to quit over repeated failures. And again, I'm not sure that this does the job, but it kind of gives you a sense of the frustration of what we're being charged with. Because it's not about inflamed passions. It is purposeful. And there's a lot of uses for blaming Israel of committing genocide. Let's say that you just commit Israel of colonialism or apartheid. If you blame Israel for apartheid, then all you have to do is to bring down the Zionist regime. But the Jews can stay. If you blame Israel for colonialism, then the Jews need to go away back home, but they can live somewhere else. If you blame Israel and Zionism for genocide, well, nothing but total war for their annihilation will do. And then it also serves other purposes. Because if the Jewish people are committing genocide, then I guess the genocide against them was not so bad. Even justified, retroactively justified. That's another great use of this. Or, and that is a completely accepted but wrong idea, that if the Palestinian people are experiencing genocide, then the world will give them a state or will be on their side. There is a phenomenon which I call Zionism denial. We all know what Holocaust denial is. Zionism denial is the story that the state of Israel was given to the Jewish people, the remnants, after Europe realized that it has failed in its final solution, in some random piece of land in its empire, because it felt guilty. And that's why the Jews have a state, and also that's why they pushed out the Palestinians, and I'm sure you've heard it. Europe has a responsibility towards the Palestinians because they are the secondary victims of Europe's crimes. Well, that is not only utter nonsense, that is complete denial of the history of Zionism. Before World War II, Israel existed in everything but name. Israel has come into being not because guilty Europeans gave it to them. By the way, they didn't feel so guilty, just so you know. It took at least a generation for some people to start feeling guilty. But Israel exists, and Israel has come into being because the Jewish people willed it into being. And that is the story that the Palestinians have yet to understand. That a state is not given, not handed over. You have to will it into being through positive action. And that is the story of Zionism. But if you tell the story of genocide, well, maybe a guilty world will give you a state and in the process get rid of those genocidal Jews. Unless you think that these accusations disappeared with the summer, I just came from Belfast, where I met a senior member of Sinn Féin, who told me that it is a shame, 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 the genocide that Israel committed over the summer. And initially I said, look, if what happened in the summer was genocide, we would have 10 million more Jews alive today. And I started to explain to him, this is war. Yes, 2,000 people were killed, but 1,000 were militants and 1,000 were civilians, where Israel took unparalleled and unprecedented measures in world history to limit civilian casualties, its own and those of the other side. And then he said, we'll agree to disagree. And I was like, no. This is not a minor point of disagreement where we agree to disagree. You will retract what you said. And we were at it for a while until he had to end the meeting. But this is the essence of how this war is being waged. And these things stick. And if we don't fight, they stick. Well, in the age of the internet, if you don't respond, it sticks. If a Norwegian politician says that the Mossad is behind the shooting of the young Norwegians in that island, and no one says anything because it's insane, that sticks. And if people say that Israel set up this remarkable field hospital in Haiti to harvest organs, that sticks. So we need to understand that this is what's going on. Nothing less. And nothing here is accidental. Nothing here is about inflamed passion. It's with a very sinister purpose. So what needs to be done? First, we need to recognize what this is all about. What this war is all about, that the nonviolent means say nothing about the fact that the purpose is a violent end. And we need to mobilize. And that's another reason I speak so highly of Boaz and Nurit, because they are mobilized. And not enough of our foreign service is mobilized. We don't need diplomats anymore. We need warriors.
Yeah.
We need people to fight, because this is a war. And then what we need is for all of you to mobilize and to enlist. Now, when we had to defend ourselves physically, we established what was called the Israeli Defense Forces. Now I argue we should create, and for all intents and purposes I will argue that even though it's a figment of my imagination, let's pretend it already exists, the IDF, the Israeli Intellectual Defense Forces. Because that's what we need today. We need intellectual warriors, people who wield words and images and ideas to win this battle. And the beauty is that each and every one of you can self-enlist. In fact, you're here because you have already self-enlisted. You have already done something to fight. And this is a long-haul battle. I said we emerged stronger from all our challenges, but it didn't happen overnight. It took us 25 years to get the militaries of Arab countries to finally decide not to try to mobilize their militaries against Israel. It took us decades to build Israel's export-based economy. It took us decades to figure out how to deal with terrorism. And it will take us a while to win this war. But we will win it. And I will tell you why. And I will tell you first what victory will look like. Because you might wonder what victory looks like in a war of words and images and ideas. This is my definition of victory. Victory will come the day that those who hold anti-Zionist views, that those who hold the placard views that I discussed, will have the social acceptability of neo-Nazis. That's my definition of victory. Because right now, they enjoy social acceptability. You're the ones that are out. Which is why it's good, because here you have social acceptability. This is where it starts. And then it becomes bigger and bigger. But right now, they have the social acceptability. That is the entry into polite society. It's almost difficult to preserve your place in polite society when you speak for Israel. That has to be reversed. That is the essence of victory. And we will win, ultimately, after making many mistakes in the process, and after it's going to take us quite a few years. But we will win first for the reason we have won all the other wars and challenges, because we have no choice. And ultimately, I will say that if there is any war that the Jewish people and their friends around the world should be able to win, it is a war of words. Thank you.